On March 14, 1998, in a suburb 40 miles outside of Melbourne, Australia, a woman named Patricia Greenwood walked into her local police station and calmly reported that she had not slept in 11 days. The officers assumed exhaustion, perhaps a mental health crisis. But when they asked her to describe what was preventing her from sleeping, she said something that made them pause. "I close my eyes, but I don't go anywhere." Today's episode contains 5 real cases. What you're about to hear are documented events, pulled from medical records, police files, institutional reports, and interviews conducted over decades. These are not mysteries designed for entertainment. They are gaps in our understanding, moments when a predictable world revealed something we still cannot fully explain. Let's begin. The woman who stopped sleeping. Patricia Greenwood was 42 years old when she walked into that police station. According to the report filed that day, she appeared physically sound. No signs of drug use, no visible injuries, no indicators of psychosis. She worked as a librarian. She lived alone. She had no history of sleep disorders. The officers referred her to a hospital. Medical records from the Royal Melbourne Hospital note that Patricia was admitted for observation on March 15, 1998. She told doctors the same thing she had told police. She had not slept since March 3rd. Nurses monitored her continuously, according to their logs. Patricia lay in bed with her eyes closed for hours at a time. Her breathing slowed, her body stilled. But when they checked her brain activity using an EEG, the results were inconsistent with sleep. Her brain remained active, not in the way it does during REM sleep or deep sleep, but in a state the attending neurologist described as alert rest. By March 20th, Patricia had been awake for 17 days. Dr. Simon Holt, the neurologist assigned to her case, noted in his report that Patricia showed no signs of the cognitive decline typically associated with sleep deprivation. She was lucid. Her memory functioned normally. She could solve puzzles, hold conversations, and follow complex instructions. But she reported a growing sense of what she called unreality. "I feel like I'm standing just outside of time," she told Dr. Holt during one session. "Everything is happening, but I'm not inside it anymore." On March 25th, after 22 days without sleep, Patricia was transferred to a research facility in Sydney that specialized in circadian disorders. The lead researcher, Dr. Evelyn Marsh, has spent 15 years studying fatal familial insomnia, a rare genetic disorder that prevents sleep and eventually leads to death. But Patricia's case didn't match the profile. She had no family history of the disorder. Her genetic tests came back negative. Dr. Marsh's notes describe Patricia as cooperative but increasingly detached. She participated in every test, answered every question, but seemed to be observing herself from a distance. On day 28, Patricia asked Dr. Marsh a question that stayed with her. "If I never sleep again, will I still be the same person?" By early April, Patricia had been awake for 33 days. News of her case began circulating quietly in medical journals. Researchers from around the world reached out, offering theories: neurological anomalies, dissociative episodes, a new variant of a known disorder. But nothing fit. Then, on April 9th, something changed. Patricia told the nurses she felt tired. Not exhausted, she clarified, but something like the memory of being tired. That night, monitors showed her brain activity shifting. For the first time in 37 days, she entered a sleep state. It lasted 4 hours. When she woke, she seemed different. Nurses reported that she looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. She asked what day it was. When they told her, she nodded slowly and said, "I've been gone." Over the next week, Patricia's sleep patterns normalized. She returned home in late April. Dr. Marsh attempted to follow up with her several times over the following year, but Patricia declined further participation. In her final correspondence, she wrote, "I appreciate your concern, but I don't want to go back to that place, not even in memory." Patricia Greenwood died in 2014 from unrelated causes. Medical examiners found no abnormalities in her brain. To this day, no one has been able to explain what happened during those 37 days. Was it a neurological event we don't yet have the tools to measure? A psychological break, so subtle it left no trace? or something else entirely? A liminal space between waking and sleep that most of us never encounter? Dr. Marsh, now retired, still keeps Patricia's case file in her office. In a 2019 interview, she said, "Some cases don't have answers, but they remind us how much we assume about the mind, about consciousness. Patricia was awake, but she wasn't here, and I'm not sure we'll ever understand what that means." The recurring room. In the summer of 1979, a psychology graduate student named Michael Tremaine was conducting research on dream recall at the University of Edinburgh. He was looking for participants who experienced recurring dreams. People reported dreaming the same scenario, location, or narrative multiple times over months or years. One of his respondents was a man named David Ashford. David was 31 years old, a civil engineer, married with 2 children. He described himself as practical, not prone to anxiety or obsessive thinking. But he had been dreaming about the same room since he was 19. According to Michael's notes, David's description was remarkably consistent. The room was small, perhaps 10 by 12 feet, with pale green walls and a single window covered by a thin, yellowed curtain. There was a wooden chair in one corner and a narrow bed with a gray wool blanket. The floor was linoleum, cracked near the baseboard. The room had no door. David said he didn't do anything in the dream. He simply stood in the room and looked around. Sometimes the light through the window was bright, as though it were midday. Other times it was dim, almost dusk, but the room itself never changed. Michael asked him if the dream frightened him. David said no. It was more like returning to a place he'd forgotten, familiar but unwelcome. This wasn't particularly unusual. Recurring dreams are common, often tied to unresolved stress or memory. Michael thanked David for his time and filed the interview away. But 3 weeks later, David called him. He said he needed to speak with him immediately. They met at a cafe near the university. David looked tired. He told Michael that he had found the room. According to Michael's account, published years later in a small academic journal, David explained that he'd been driving through the Scottish borders on business. He'd stopped in a village called Kirkhope to refuel. While waiting, he noticed an old boarding house across the street. Something about it pulled at him. He walked over and knocked on the door. The woman who answered was elderly, the owner. David asked if he could look around. She was hesitant, but eventually agreed. He walked through the ground floor, then up the narrow staircase to the second floor. At the end of the hallway, there was a door. He opened it. It was the room from his dream. Same pale green walls. Same window with the yellowed curtain. Same wooden chair. Same bed. Same cracked linoleum. Every detail matched. Michael asked him what he did. David said he stood there for several minutes, trying to process what he was seeing. Then he asked the landlady about the room. She told him it had been empty for years. No one wanted to rent it. When he pressed her on why, she hesitated, then said, "People don't like the feel of it." David left the boarding house and drove home. That night, he dreamed about the room again. But this time there was something different. In the dream, he noticed a small object on the windowsill. A glass bottle, dark blue, no label. He hadn't seen it before. The next weekend, David drove back to Kirkhope. He asked the landlady if he could see the room again. She let him in. He went to the window. On the sill, covered in dust, was a dark blue glass bottle. He left and never went back. Michael attempted to verify the details. He traveled to Kirkhope and spoke with the landlady, whose name was Margaret Coulter. She confirmed that a man matching David's description had visited twice. She also confirmed that the room had a strange reputation. Previous tenants, she said, had complained of unease, of feeling watched. One man had left after a single night, refusing to explain why. Michael asked if he could see the room. Margaret agreed. His notes describe it exactly as David had. Pale green walls, yellow curtain, wooden chair, narrow bed. The blue bottle was still on the windowsill. Margaret said it had been there when she inherited the property in 1965. She didn't know where it came from. Michael took photographs. He interviewed David multiple times over the following months. David insisted he had never been to Kirkhope before 1979, had no connection to the area, no family history there. Michael checked public records. There was no indication David had any link to the boarding house or the village. But there was one more detail. In December 1979, David told Michael that the dreams had stopped. He hadn't dreamed about the room since his second visit to Kirkhope. Michael asked him if he felt relieved. David said no. He said it felt like he'd left something unfinished. Margaret Coulter passed away in 1983. The boarding house was sold and eventually demolished in 1991. Michael Tremaine kept the photographs and his notes. In 2003, he published a short paper on the case titled The Recurring Room, a study in precognitive dream imagery. The paper was largely ignored by mainstream psychology, dismissed as anecdotal, but Michael never stopped thinking about it. In an interview in 2012, he said, David had no reason to lie. He wasn't seeking attention. He was disturbed by it. And I saw the room. I saw the bottle. So either this was a coincidence so precise it defies probability, or we don't understand how memory and perception really work. I'm not sure which possibility is more unsettling. David Ashford declined to be interviewed for this episode. According to those who knew him, he never spoke publicly about the room again, the archive that wrote itself. In 1983, a small private library in Bruges, Belgium, reported an unusual inventory discrepancy. The library, known as the Archive van de Stilte, the Archive of Silence, was a collection of rare manuscripts, letters, and historical documents maintained by a trust established in the 1890s. It was not open to the public. Access was granted only to researchers with specific credentials. The librarian at the time was a man named Julian Mays. According to his report to the Trust Board, dated November 1983, a box of documents had appeared in the archive storage room. The box was labeled Correspondence 1892 to 1897, Correspondence 1892 to 1897. The problem was that no such box had been cataloged. There was no record of its acquisition, no donor listed, no reference in the archive's logs. Julian opened the box. Inside were approximately 40 letters, all handwritten, all in French. They appeared to be personal correspondence between two individuals, signed only with initials CV and ML. The letters were dated between March 1892 and August 1897. At first, Julian assumed they had been misfiled decades earlier, their entry lost in some clerical error. But when he examined the paper and ink, something felt wrong. The material seemed older than the date suggested. The handwriting was formal, consistent with the late 19th century, but the language, while grammatically correct, had an odd, stilted quality. Some phrases were archaic, others almost poetic, but in a way that didn't quite match the period. Julian sent 3 of the letters to a forensic document examiner in Brussels. The examiner, Dr. Hanna Voss, tested the paper and ink. Her report, filed in January 1984, noted that the paper was consistent with late 19th century production, likely from a mill in northern France. The ink was iron gall, standard for the period. The physical documents appeared authentic, but there was an anomaly. Dr. Voss noted that there were patterns on the paper. The folds, the discoloration, suggested the letters had been handled and stored for far longer than 90 years. In her words, the aging is inconsistent. These letters look as though they have existed for a century and a half, not 90 years. Julian returned to the archive and began reading the letters more carefully. They told a fragmented story, 2 people, CV and ML, discussing a shared project. They referred to the catalog, the index, and the preservation of what will be forgotten. The tone was urgent but vague. In one letter, dated June 1895, CV wrote, "We are not the authors. We are only the custodians. The archive will continue without us." In another, dated May 1897, ML responded, "I have seen it grow beyond what we intended. I no longer know if we are recording history or creating it." Julian became obsessed with identifying CV and ML. He searched birth records, property deeds, historical registries across Belgium and France. He found no matches, no individuals with those initials connected to Bruges, to archival work, or to the trust that maintained the library. Then, in March 1984, another box appeared. This one was labeled corresponding 1898 to 1903. Same handwriting on the label, same type of box. Julian was certain it had not been there the day before. He checked the security logs. No one had entered the storage room. Inside were 30 more letters, continuing the correspondence between CV and ML. The tone had shifted. The letters were shorter, more fragmented, almost frantic. In one, dated April 1900, CV wrote, "I no longer know when I am writing to you or when you are writing to me. The archive has begun to fold back on itself." Julian reported this to the trust board. They authorized a full audit of the archive. Over the following 6 months, researchers cataloged every item. No additional anomalies were found, but the 2 boxes of letters remained unexplained. Then, in October 1984, Julian noticed something. In the final letter in the second box, dated November 1903, ML had written a single sentence. "If you are reading this, you are the next custodian." Below it was a name, Julian Mays. Julian resigned from his position shortly after. In his resignation letter, he stated only that he could no longer continue his work at the archive. He refused to elaborate. The trust appointed a new librarian in early 1985. In 2009, Dr. Porter published a paper on the case in the Journal of Neuropsychology. He proposed that Thomas may have experienced a temporary disruption in the way his brain processed time perception. Not that he was seeing the future, but that his brain was constructing memory from anticipatory prediction and presenting it as past experience. But Dr. Porter admitted the explanation was unsatisfying. In an interview years later, he said, "We assume memory is about the past and perception is about the present. But what if, for some people under certain conditions, the brain doesn't make that distinction as cleanly as we think?" Thomas wasn't guessing. He was remembering. And I still don't know what that means. Thomas would decline to be interviewed for this episode. According to Dr. Porter, Thomas moved to Canada in 2011 and has avoided public discussion of his experiences. In his final correspondence with Dr. Porter, he wrote, "I'm glad it stopped. Knowing what about to happen, even for a few seconds, made everything feel scripted. I don't want to live like that." Dr. Porter retired in 2020. He still keeps Thomas's case file, along with the timestamp logs and verification notes. He says it remains one of the strangest cases he ever encountered, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so ordinary. Small moments, recalled before they happened, and no explanation for why. The house on Elderwood Lane. In the fall of 2002, a real estate agent named Karen DeLacy was showing a house in Portland, Oregon. The property was a modest 2-story home on Elderwood Lane, built in 1968, recently vacated. It had been on the market for 3 months with no offers. Karen's client was a young couple, first-time buyers. She led them to the ground floor, living room, kitchen, dining area. Everything seemed standard, but when they reached the staircase to the second floor, Karen noticed something odd. At the top of the stairs, there was a door. She didn't remember seeing it during her initial walkthrough weeks earlier. It was painted white, with a simple brass knob, slightly ajar. Karen opened it. Behind the door was a small room, perhaps 8 by 10 feet, empty, carpeted. A single window overlooking the backyard. The couple asked if it was a bedroom. Karen said she wasn't sure. She checked the floor plan. The room wasn't listed. After the showing, Karen contacted the seller's agent. She asked about the room at the top of the stairs. The agent paused, then said there was no such room. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. That was it. Karen insisted. She'd seen it. She'd been inside it. The seller's agent arranged to meet her at the property the following day. When they arrived, they went upstairs. The door was gone. In its place was a flat wall, painted the same off-white as the rest of the hallway. Karen was certain she hadn't imagined it. She brought the couple back to see the house again. They confirmed. The door had been there. They had looked inside. Karen contacted the previous owner, a woman named Diane Morse. Diane had lived in the house for 12 years with her husband before moving to Arizona. Karen asked her about the second floor. Diane confirmed there were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. No additional rooms. Then Karen asked a different question. "Did you ever see anything unusual in the house?" There was a long pause. Then Diane said, "Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps in a room that didn't exist." According to Diane, she and her husband had occasionally heard sounds from the second floor, soft footsteps, the creak of a door opening, faint movement, when no one else was home. They'd assumed it was the house settling. But once, in 2000, Diane had been folding laundry on the landing when she glanced down the hallway and saw a door. She walked toward it. When she got within a few feet, it was gone. She never told her husband. She said she convinced herself it was a trick of the light, exhaustion, stress. Karen filed a report with a real estate agency. The house was taken off the market temporarily while the agency conducted an inspection. Contractors checked the second floor. They found no evidence of a hidden room, no structural inconsistencies, no hollow spaces behind the walls. But two of the contractors reported the same thing. While working on the second floor, they both heard footsteps coming from a room they couldn't locate. The house was put back on the market in early 2003. It sold quickly to a family who had no knowledge of the reports. Karen checked in with them a year later. They said they'd never experienced anything unusual. In 2011, the house was sold again. The new owner was a man named Eric Talmadge. He lived there alone. 6 months after moving in, he contacted Karen. He said he'd found something. In the hallway at the top of the stairs, the paint had begun to peel in a narrow vertical line, about the height and width of a doorframe. Eric scraped away some of the paint. Beneath it was older wallpaper. Beneath that, older paint. He kept going, layer after layer, as though the wall had been painted over repeatedly for decades. At the bottom layer, he found pencil marks, faint, barely legible. They appeared to be measurements, dimensions for a door. Below them, in the same handwriting, room 4. Eric stopped digging. He repainted the wall and moved out 3 months later. Karen retired from real estate in 2015. In an interview for this episode, she said, "I've shown hundreds of houses. I've seen foundation issues, water damage, bad wiring, but I've never encountered anything like Elderwood Lane. I don't know if the room was ever physically there, or if it was something else, something that existed just at the edge of perception. But I saw it, and I know I'm not the only one." The house on Elderwood Lane is currently occupied. The owners declined to be interviewed. These 5 cases span decades, continents, and disciplines. They involve different people, different circumstances, different forms of documentation, but they share a common thread. They resist easy explanation. Patricia Greenwood, who stopped sleeping for 37 days. David Ashford, who dreamed of a room he'd never seen. The archive of silence, where letters appeared that may have been writing themselves. Thomas Wynne, who remembered moments before they happened. And the house on Elderwood Lane, where a door appeared and vanished. None of these cases were solved. No definitive answers were ever provided. The people involved moved on, or retreated into silence, or passed away with their questions unanswered. We assume the world operates according to consistent, measurable principles. That memory is about the past. That perception is about the present. That physical space remains constant. But these cases remind us that the boundaries we take for granted may not be as fixed as we believe. This has been the Quiet Archive. Thank you for listening. If you have a documented case you believe belongs here, you can reach us through our website. We're not looking for ghost stories or urban legends. We're looking for evidence, for records, for the moments when reality became uncertain, and no one could explain why. Until next time,